you get extra credit in heaven for making it on a July 4th long weekend. So that's actually not true, but I'm glad you're here. And we are in part 2 of this series. And as I jump into what we're going to talk about, I thought back. So I've got 4 kids. Many of you know that if you've been around here for a minute. And they get injured every once in a while, and we have to go to the emergency room. Oddly enough, though, it's always my daughter and not the 3 boys. And there was one particular incident where she was on the top bunk. They've got bunk beds, and she's in the boys' room. And I come upstairs, and I hear screaming and crying, and the boys are freaking out, probably because they think they're going to get in trouble. And there's, it's 11 a.m., so you can probably handle it now, but there's blood everywhere. And she was on the top bunk and somehow fell off and hit the fan, which we realized was too close to the bunk bed at that point, and gashed her head open. So she's on the floor, she's crying, and so I rush in. I'm like, what's going on? I'm trying to get the story. I'm trying to calm her down. All the while, Nicole kind of rushes in behind me, and her first reaction is, ooh, it's bad. Ooh, it's bad. I'm like, can you calm down for a second? Trying to calm down our 8-year-old. And so she's like, oh, sorry. So I go to work again. You got to wipe it away and try to figure out how deep is this? Is this emergency room worthy? So as I'm doing this, again, I hear behind me, oh, that's a lot of blood. I'm like, leave the room. So she did, and she's an amazing mother, but she'll own this. She's horrible in those circumstances where blood is involved. So I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. I realize it's kind of bad. We're probably going to need to go to the emergency room. But simultaneously, I'm trying to figure out what happened, who's culpable, how did this happen? And long story short, I realized she wasn't, pushed into it, which that's always a possibility. She just, series of events, she fell and leaned her head into it, broke it open. So immediately when I figured out it was an accident and not on purpose, I went to work to calm her down. I'm like, hey, bro, calm down, because it's an accident. So you need to chill. You don't need this many tears. I know it hurts, but if it's an accident, you shouldn't cry this way. You just need to tone it down a little bit. You're going to be fine, because everybody knows if it's an accident, everything's going to be fine. You'll probably stop bleeding. We don't need to go to the emergency room, because you go to the emergency room for things that happen on purpose, not for things that happen on accident, I'm pretty sure. So it's fine. You're going to be fine. The blood will probably stop. We'll put a tourniquet on it. I don't even know how to do that, but we'll be fine. You're going to be good. It was an accident. Calm down. And you're like, what kind of parent are you? What's your problem? No, what did I do? Well, you're wondering how bad the cut is, because I don't think I said that. It was bad. We needed to go to the emergency room. So immediately, I get her in the car, we go to the emergency room. And yes, it was an accident, but we got to get stitches. And she had to have 8 stitches or something like that. It was a whole deal. It's the 3rd time I think this has happened to her. And so we rush to the emergency room and do what you got to do to make sure that you fix it. Because what we understand in these areas of life, we forget in other areas of life that we're going to talk about today. And here's the principle. There is no correlation between intent and outcome. It doesn't matter what your intent is around certain areas of life, the outcome is going to be the same. And so I'm going to come back to that in just a second. We are in part 2 of this series called You'll Be Glad You Did, and we're looking at a literal letter that James wrote that's in the New Testament that was included in this library that is the Bible. And one of the things I would encourage you on, if you've got the app, which we already talked about 100 times, go to the message notes. There's actually links to, it's called the Bible Project, for a lot more information about James. I'd love for some of you to read through it. It's a small book. Maybe you haven't read the book in a while. Morgan Freeman will read it to you. It's amazing. I'd love for you to interact with this content over the next couple weeks. There's a bunch of resources, and we started a group called Dig Deeper on Monday nights. We had 30-some people out last weekend. You can just show up to that on Monday night. Information's on the app, but I'd love for you to actually interact with the content. But throughout the book of James, it's basically this you'll be glad you did advice about all of your life, because eventually all of us have stories where we look back and we're like, I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that we did. Or I wish I had done that. I wish I had paid attention to that. Or you look back and go, man, I'm glad we didn't do that. I'm glad we didn't sign on that. I'm glad we didn't make that decision. Or I wish we hadn't made that decision. I wish we hadn't signed on the bottom line. Because somewhere along the way, everybody realizes, even if you're 15 years old, that all of life is connected. And what's interesting is you know that, I know that, and yet we live like that's not true. That your present eventually is going to be your past, and it's going to influence your future. Even around small incremental decisions over time, they're leading you somewhere. There's a future in store for you. And so James basically says, when you live like all of your life is connected, when you take the advice that you should take around the important areas of life, you're going to look back and you're going to be glad you did, because today's behaviors and decisions, you already know this, ultimately become tomorrow's realities. And what we said last week is not only do your behaviors and decisions affect you, this is just the nature of life and relationships. They affect people around you. So when you take seriously what James writes around where you're heading in terms of life, not only are you going to be glad that you did, the people around you are going to be glad that you did. And this is not any more true than it is with how we use our words and their importance in terms of our life and our future, and taking James' advice that we're going to look at in a few minutes. Now, here's the thing. According to studies, we operate with about 5,000 words a day, which there's a lot of opportunity for failure, number one. Today I could burn down my career with some wrong words at the wrong time that never is going to leave the internet, So words are a big deal. We understand how important they are. Depending on how old your kids are, some of my kids, I'm pretty sure, are averaging about 12,000 words a day. So it just depends. But point is, all of us use a lot of words every single day. And then what's really difficult in terms of communication and words is a lot of what we communicate, about 90% they say, is nonverbal. It's body language. So then you enter text into the equation, and how we use our words over text, it becomes even more complicated. In fact, I'll just give you a couple examples real quick, and maybe these are just personal to me. I don't know, but maybe some of you will relate. If you've ever gotten this text right here, sure. Like, what point are you trying to make sending me a sure text? Like, what kind of childhood trauma are you trying to unwind from that you've got to send me a sure? Or just go a step further. Maybe you've gotten this one before, okay. And again, the okay might be fine. I don't know, it's still not really, I don't love it, depending on what I sent you. But the okay with a period, it's like, again, like, when did you decide to hate me? Why are you sending me a text with an okay? And then you got to put the period on there. There's so much that I can read into that. And then there's one more, and I'm just going to tell you this. This might be the application for today. And if you have ever done this, I'm just going to double down. What I'm about to say, you should get on your phone. You should apology text to everybody that you've sent this to. But here's the next one right here. K. If you ever text me a K, just send the middle finger emoji and that'll suffice. Are you serious? A K with a period? Thank you. So my point is, like, communication is hard. And you know this already, and we could all share our stories, but words have the potential to sabotage our future. That's not an overstatement. And words have the potential, and James is going to make this case, words have the potential to control all of our life. You already know words have weight. And I think I can include everybody in the room and everybody listening on Unfiltered Radio, you're podcasting, watching somewhere. I think there's 100% of people. You can look back and remember words spoken over you that wounded you deeply. I don't think there's a human being that's not been affected. They can encourage you, they can discourage you, and isn't it true? You say a wrong, even if it's a small thing at the wrong time, in the wrong way, like, don't critique my message after I've just preached it. Email me on Tuesday. You can say a wrong word at the wrong time. It's so unbelievably discouraging. You can inspire with words. You can destroy somebody for a decade with your words. Words have unbelievable weight. And the reality is, all of our lives have been shaped by words that have been said to us, about us, over us. In some cases, the people who said them are not even aware that we're still living out of words said when we were 11 years old. In fact, you are still trying to prove something to somebody that's maybe not even in your life anymore, maybe not even alive anymore, simply because of the words that were spoken over your life, and they stuck. And the other part of it is, our lives have been shaped by the words that haven't been said to us. And this should be kind of a given, but doing what I do, I hear these stories all the time that they never got a chance to hear, I love you. And it shaped their future, it shaped their life, it shaped some of their dating, some of the decisions they made. Here's another one. I'm so proud of you. And can I just give some advice to Christian parents for a second? Because maybe I'm wrong. I think there's certain sects of Christianity that struggle with this more than others, because somehow, especially in raising kids, we feel like we've got to be the moral police and the Holy Spirit, and we feel so much responsibility that we've got to measure and weight all of their behaviors and outcomes and whether it matches up with how we want to live our life. Your kid, when they get older, does not need to hear, I'm proud of you, even though we disagree. I'm proud of you, even though you've made some No. They just need to hear from you as a son or a daughter and somebody who's made in the image of God, I'm so proud of you. Even if you disagree with some of the ways that they live, or then people who've never heard this, I'll always have your back. And the thing is, we recognize, I think, the weight of words, but a lot of times we're slow to take responsibility for them. And that should bother us. If you're not a Jesus follower, you can do with whatever you want with what I'm about to say. And if you apply what I'm about to say, it's going to help your life, because Jesus is smart, and James, who wrote these things, and Paul, really, really smart. But if you're a Jesus follower, that should bother us, because a huge part of following Jesus has to do with how we use our words. Because Jesus said this, I'm introducing an others first movement, which means I want you to think about other people more than you think about you. Think if all of Christianity just in our country was characterized by people who did that, and then their words reflected it. This is what we've been called to. Your word should reflect that you're a follower of Jesus. To everybody that you interact with on social media, all the people that you want to talk about out there, the people that live in your own home, the people in your community group, your words matter. In fact, some of you who aren't followers of Jesus, you'd be more curious about following Jesus if Christians had used their words more responsibly and more graciously. If you watched a generation of Christians right now in our cultural moment who were kind with their words rather than using their words to wound or hurt, especially people that they disagree with, Jesus would step into that to go, In fact, you look at the New Testament, guess who Jesus got in the face of more than anybody else and called out and lit up every single time? Religious people who irresponsibly use their words. It's a big deal. Here's what Paul said when he wrote about this, and we'll get to James in a minute in Ephesians 4:29. Do not let any unwholesome word come out of your mouths. And here's what this is talking about, because Christians, again, love to create stuff that's not actually in the Bible. What does this mean? What words can we say? What's off limits? This is specifically talking about offensive or unkind words that wound or hurt somebody else. The litmus test to measure all of Scripture, this is not so much like the words that we make up that change culturally and generationally in different areas of the country. The thing that matters about your words is the litmus test of I want you to love other people the way that God has loved you through Christ. And so any of your words that are offensive or unnecessarily hurtful to somebody else, that's what you need to pay attention to. And so he's like, guard your words. And instead, this is the way forward, only use words that are good for doing what? Let's try it again. That was a little weak. For doing what? Building others up according to their what? Needs. Now, I just want to acknowledge what we feel sometimes. I say this all the time. But you can interpret that and go, feels kind of weak, Jesus. And that's so much of what we've done in our culture. We'll pick and choose and I love Jesus. Yeah, I love one another. That seems a little weak. I'm gonna reinterpret that for 2024. Because you might think, well, that's a little weak. Can I raise kids and do that? Is that possible? Can I be successful in the marketplace and do that? Because I haven't really seen that done. How do I even do an employee evaluation? I mean, do we just sit down and hey, it'd be great if you came to work? I mean, is that what Paul's talking about? No, in fact, this is a really important distinction. This is not weakness. This isn't soft. In fact, sometimes the kindest thing that you can do is say a hard thing to somebody else. That's never what's talked about. But even in that, there is a way to not let unnecessarily hurtful or offensive language come out of your house and your mouth. And to think about, how do I build this person up, even in something that might be hard to hear, even in something that might be a little bit hard to say, so that it may benefit who? Who? Everybody who listens. Meaning, even in the hard stuff. In fact, sometimes avoiding the hard conversations is unbelievably unkind. But even in the hard stuff, there's a way to make this the litmus test of, I want to build others up so that everybody who listens benefits from me. I want to live that way. That's what Paul is calling us to. That's what Jesus is calling us to. And here's what gets in the way of that, is a lot of times in conversations, in your home, with your family, the people that you're blasting out there that you treat like they're not made in the image of God, that sometimes I'm more concerned about what I need to say than what other people need to hear. And that's a big deal. You ever had those conversations? You're like, I just feel better now. Just had to get that off my chest. Yeah, maybe you do, but they don't. And I'm not saying it didn't need said, and I'm not saying to not say the hard thing, that I'm saying that even in that conversation, you think more about how to say it and what they need to hear rather than just what you need to say to make you feel better, to build them up. And so specifically, there's 3 dynamics that we need to understand to be able to do what Paul's talking about, and that'll get us to James in just a second. And these 3 dynamics determine what people hear regardless of what we say and regardless of what we mean, because that's a big issue. And so 3 things, and I want to focus on the third one real quick, but we need to know them. First one, words are not equally weighted. You know this already, but I'm just going to say it. Negative words outweigh positive words at a disproportionate rate. In fact, studies have been done that in just like work relationships, general relationships, friendships, it's about 9-to-1 negative words to positive words. For every negative word spoken, you need about 9 positive. In other relationships, the intimate relationships, those in your home, it's about 30-to-1. And again, you know this already. It's not equally weighted. There's words that have stuck in you that were cynical, that were critical, maybe from a parent, comparative. I mean, some of you are living out of comparative words. They didn't maybe even mean anything about it, but that comparison of why aren't you more like, or I wish you were in that other season of your life, and that comparative word, it just hasn't left you. I don't know what it was, and I've done so many things wrong in parenting, but I was uniquely aware of this idea of words and the ratio of words and raising our kids so far. So I would kind of be over the top with this. I think my kids already are at the age they think I'm over the top. We're just like, Dad, stop, shut up. But it's just over and over again, and not so much what they do. I've really tried to prioritize who they are more than what they do and just speak that again and again and again and again. And I probably have been over the top at times, but here's what I know about everybody. This is just true. Nobody traces the root of their problems back to too much encouragement. I've never sat down and heard somebody say, well, you know what would help me? They would just give me less encouragement. I think my life would be better. Nobody does that. And the reality is words are not equally weighted. And the second thing that is so unbelievably important, source determines weight. Source determines weight. Who it comes from determines the weight of those words. And 2 people could say the exact same thing, but one has a lot more impact because source determines weight and weight determines impact. Like if somebody blasts you on social media, so because we have radio and there's platforms on like Facebook, there's quite a few people, I'll get direct messages all the time, or I'll get people to comment on stuff, and usually it's pretty funny. And I was gonna put them on slides, but I thought that wasn't a good idea. But I just got one this week, like just no, like, hey, how's it, just brainwasher. That was my direct message into my thing. I'll share one more with you. There's a lot. You're a false teacher, and there's a warm place waiting for you, is another one. So that's fun. No XO at the end of it, just straight to the point. And does it bother me? No. And not because I'm like spiritual or mature or any of those things. None of those people know me. It's a 30-second clip. I've never met them. They're out there somewhere on the internet. It doesn't matter. But if that's your kid, it's my spouse, somebody who works with me. I mean, here's the thing, just to talk about kids. The relationship that your kids have with you is not the same relationship that you have with your kids. Especially in a season where you're still in the raising season, the coaching season, because they're equal because they're equal in the image of God, but there's not equal authority and equal influence. And so the words that you say to them, they just weigh more. It's not equal. I mean, every once in a while, my assistant will stop me where I'm like, well, I need to have this conversation. I'm not angry or anything like that, but I need to go to somebody or talk to somebody or like, hey, you need to let a direct report do that because your words to that particular person are just going to weigh a ton more. And I have to stop myself. Or just this last week, to be vulnerable. There was something with my daughter, and I just, and again, wasn't upset about anything, but I just said something to her, and immediately I knew that I wasn't the source for that information, and my wife did the little, can we talk, to the side, and she said exactly what I already knew after I said it. Hey, look, you were completely right in what you said, but you're not the one to deliver that information. Because in that particular conversation, the fact that it came from me, what my words just weighed a lot more. Here's my point. You have to, in every conversation, understand who you are and what you represent, because words and the source of those words determine weight, and weight determines ultimate impact. And then the third one, which is where I want to spend all of our time, intent is usually irrelevant. Your intent, what you intended, is usually irrelevant. And this brings me back to what I started with. There is no necessary correlation between intent and outcome, is there? There's no necessary correlation. And in fact, explaining does not equal repairing, does it? Explaining does not. In fact, isn't there certain moments where somebody explains to you what they meant, especially if it's too early and there's just this offensive thing that happened, and their explanation feels irritating. It's just irrelevant. It's like, I don't care right now. Like, I'm still wounded, because explaining does not equal repairing. In fact, in those moments, the best way I could say it, when something has been broken, you ever broken a window, you ever broken, something that's valuable to somebody destroyed your phone. I mean, an accident's an accident, but broken is still broken. And intent is usually irrelevant. And in those moments, in terms of our lives when we feel broken, an explanation is not what we need. We need glued back together. And an explanation doesn't glue us back together. An explanation, even if it was an accident, doesn't fix it. But a lot of times we do this and then we wonder, like, well, why aren't you good now? I explained to you what I meant. I explained to you, it was just a joke. I explained to you, I was just being sarcastic. Why aren't we good now? Because somehow, we forget then when we're the person who is offending somebody else, we immediately go to intent and we'll say things like this. Well, I didn't mean it that way. That didn't come out right. This next one, I don't know how many times in my marriage to my wife have I said this one. I was just trying to be funny. And you should get me by now. Or the last one, it wasn't my intent to hurt you. And we double down on well, this is what I intended. Here's my explanation. Here's why I did this. But here's what is so subtle that we never realize and we never really see, and it's not our intention. But do you know what all of those statements communicate? Just one word right here: blame. Every time we do that. And again, we don't see it if we're on the side of we have delivered offensive words or hurtful words, or words that have broken something. But to somebody else, they communicate blame. It basically communicates, hey, you interpreted what I said wrong. You should have understood me better. This is kind of your fault for not understanding what I was trying to say. It's your fault that your feelings were hurt. And the implication is you should just kind of be more mature. You should be tougher. You should be smarter. You don't get my sarcasm by now. I've been married for 15 years. And it puts the blame on that person. And here's what we never intend with our explanations, but explanations sound like blaming. Explanations kind of sound like, yeah, I said it, but it's your fault in terms of how you took it. And when we combine an explanation with an apology, which most of us do, not only does it feel like blame, it feels like something else too. It feels like pressure. It feels like expectation. It feels like, well, yeah, I said it, but I explained it, and I told you what I meant, or I told you that I didn't mean it, and so we should be good, right? We should be back together. Everything should be fine. And then when our apology mixed with an explanation doesn't work, I feel like we kind of think it's a Jedi mind trick, where everything is not all back together, and they forget about, oh, you didn't mean it. Okay, that's fine. When it doesn't work, then we double down and we'll start to say things like this. Well, I said I'm sorry. I already said I'm sorry. Why are we not good? Or why aren't we fine now? Yes, I know I said it 35 minutes ago, but I explained myself. Or this last one, why aren't we back to where we were before I said what I said? And we get in this place where we wonder, why are they still angry? Why are they still withdrawn? Why are they still hurt? And we just press harder and press harder. And ultimately, to them, it feels like it is their fault because I've done my part. Yeah, I said it, but I explained it, and we should all be able to move on. But here's the thing. This is what we understand if you've ever slammed somebody's hands in a car door. It happens more often than you think, especially if you've got 3 or more kids, you slammed one of your kids' hands in a car door some point along the way. Here's what we understand when that happens. Apologies don't reverse or erase accidental injuries to the body, right? They still hurt. They still feel the pain. And apologies don't reverse and erase accidental injuries to the soul. Injuries to the heart, injuries to the soul, injuries to a reputation, injuries to somebody's security, injuries to their confidence. They don't erase any of those things. And when we mix an apology with an explanation, it feels like an excuse. It feels like we're blaming, even though we'd never say that, or we maybe would never even see that. And here's the thing. In some cases, physical damage is not as harsh as words that damage. Because here's the thing about words. Like if I slam your hand in a car door, I mean, I didn't intend to, unless I'm a psychopath. Like I didn't mean to do that. But here's the thing about words, and you all know this. After you've said the words and explained yourself and apologized, I'm not completely certain you didn't mean what you said. Because you meant something. And yeah, it didn't slip out because you're, socially aware, and usually you'll filter than that to get a date and keep a job and to keep everybody happy. But every once in a while it slips out. And so I'm not sure that you didn't really mean it because it was in there, and I'm not really sure if it's still not in there. How do I know that I didn't just find out something about how you view me and how you value me? That's why words are so unbelievably damaging, and why explanations and excuses feel like blame and they don't actually move anything forward. So here's what James says, the brother of Jesus. His words are so on point. In James 3:2, he says this: we all stumble in how many ways? So I just always like to do this. How many of you screwed up at some point in your life? Okay, that's 100% of hands, guys. That's about 35%. How many screwed up at some point in your life? I just always want to break down the illusion. You come to church, everybody looks pretty, they must have it together. James is like, everybody is screwed up, and your words are a battleground to screw up maybe more than any other area of your life. I guarantee everybody has some regret in terms of words. And so then he says this: anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect. And it's hyperbole, because nobody's going to hit this standard, but his point is this: that when you learn to control your mouth, you've arrived. That's mature. That's strength. And we live in a cultural moment where sometimes we view strength as just saying what you want when you need to say it. That's what they need to hear. That's what they need to know. Good job being man enough to say it. Jesus say, no. You're the weakest person in the room. You learn to control your words against all odds. It is a cascading effect on every other area of your life. And this isn't about personality. Some people talk more, less, have completely different Enneagram types. This isn't about any of that. This is about offensive, hurtful, how you use your words. Those who are never at fault, meaning mouth control is the ultimate self-control, James would say. You start to control your life and your future if you can get hold of this, because your words have the potential to damage every relationship in your life. And then he continues and said this: consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. And over the last couple of years, wildfires out west were probably more acclimated to what this looks like, where literally a campfire can destroy hundreds of thousands of acres. It can displace people. It can upend lives. Lives are lost. It can destroy everything from one small spark. And so he gives the perfect analogy, verse 6, that the tongue also is what? Your words are a spark that can burn down a marriage. Your words are a spark that can set flame to a relationship. Your words are powerful enough, just starting as a spark, didn't even mean it, didn't even intend it. It can disrupt a relationship with an adult kid. Your words are powerful enough to destroy a company culture, to separate, to undermine the future, to destroy somebody's confidence and reputation. And there's two ways that you respond to a fire. You contain it or you extinguish it. You contain it or you extinguish it. You contain it or you extinguish it. And generally, this is just our default, when we are on the side of, I've said some words that were hurtful or that wounded somebody, we kind of intuitively go to contain mode, which is why we try to explain. But explaining does not contain. In fact, in a lot of cases, it spreads the wildfire of your words. I mean, all of you have been in the circumstance where somebody has been insensitive and hurt you with your words, and then they go directly into explanation mode, and they make the situation worse. I don't need an explanation right now. I don't need you to try to defend. You're trying to contain rather than extinguish, and you're making it worse. And so word fires are only extinguished with two things: humility, sensitivity. Humility, sensitivity. Humility to go, I'm taking responsibility for what I said, and we'll talk about how to in a second. I'm telling you, if that person is close to you right now, it's really, really difficult. It takes a ton of responsibility to own what you said and not go into explanation mode that feels like blame. It is so difficult. So it takes unbelievable humility. It takes unbelievable sensitivity. The only way to heal where you've been insensitive is to counteract that with sensitivity. And to move in the direction where you elevate their needs above your needs. Here's the thing that you've never thought about. Explanations elevate your needs. Explanation is about you being judged correctly, you explaining yourself, you being understood. This is not how I meant it. To extinguish a word fire, it's humility, it's sensitivity, and I get that that's not like great new information. That is unbelievably hard to do. So let's just practice real quick. Here's the application. Here's how you extinguish a word fire, at least begin that process. I'm so sorry. You're like, that's what I came for? Yeah, that's what you came for. In fact, again, so easy. But some of you've never said those words, just those words. So let's just say it together real quick. I'm so sorry. One more time because we need the reps. Ready? Ready? 1, 2, 3. I'm so sorry. Now, here's the most important part of it. This next thing right here. That right there. Period. Stop talking. Full stop. I'm so sorry. And come on, how difficult is that? When you've offended, when you've hurt with your words, where you've wounded somebody, it is very difficult to just go, I'm sorry. And especially for me, I tend to, like to argue, and I can usually get my point across pretty quickly. So I feel like if I can just launch into an explanation, you'll understand me real quickly. I'm so sorry. And if some of you are like, well, I got a lot of words, man. Okay, so for you, rinse and repeat. I'm so sorry. You didn't, I see people hitting one another. You shouldn't do that, okay? That's not gonna go well. You didn't deserve, there's no excuse for that. I'm so sorry. So if you just need to repeat the same thing in different ways, do it. I'm so sorry, full stop. And in that space and in that silence, allow them to take charge of the restoration process. And I'm not talking about this is some big divisive thing, and it could be that, where it's gonna end a marriage. I mean, sometimes, right? I mean, this happens all the time. It happens weekly sometimes in a home where there's multiple people in a relationship. That's just the nature of life in a relationship. But even if it's like for 45 minutes and you're not talking to each other, or that thing you just had with your kid, or the coworker that annoyed you again, and why were they late on the what? When you've wounded or hurt with your words, silence and space gives them the opportunity to be in control of the restoration process because you did the damage. You need to allow them to choose the speed of recovery. Can I give you a couple examples real quick? Wind it down. I'm going to because they're in my notes. And some of these, like you may not agree with them, but I'm going to double down on it anyway. Don't tell them how bad you feel. And I get we all struggle with this. I've done this so many times. Because that's a request for empathy. You're the one that offended. You don't need the empathy in the moment. They do. So don't tell them how bad you feel. The second thing is, and this is going to be tough for some of you, don't ask for a hug. And I'm going to tell you why. Because that's a request for proximity. And you need to give them space to move back in your direction. This is my one thing to parents, take it or leave it. But when you do this as much as you can, you need to allow that space and that time for them to move back in your direction. Do not use your authority as a means to demand proximity. Allow them to move in your direction. And then the last one, don't ask for forgiveness. You know why? Because forgiveness is a gift. Forgiveness is not something that you are entitled to. And when you ask for forgiveness, what is it? It feels like pressure. It feels like you've got to do this. You have to give them time to decide when, to decide how, to decide if. You have to take all the pressure off. This allows somebody else to move back in your direction and to restore the relationship. And that is how you extinguish a word fire rather than contain a word fire and make it worse. And I'm just telling you, you can argue with me. If more people would do this, there would be a lot better adult-kid relationships with their parents once they leave the house. There would be better work environments in your marketplace. There would be a better, HOA. Those might be beyond repair, but there would be better stuff out in culture in the world if we all took that seriously. But this is how, when you screw up with your words, you elevate the other person. And you only elevate by deciding that I'm not going to run in with an explanation that feels like blame and put pressure on them. I'm going to elevate them and I'm going to create space so that they can set the pace. And come on, can you imagine what would happen in your home, in our world, in our culture? I was talking to Jesus followers for a second. If you're not a Jesus follower, you should just point your fingers at us and go, why aren't you doing this? If every Jesus follower would take this seriously, words are not equally weighted. Source determines weight and weight determines impact. Never forget who you are and what you represent when you deliver any kind of words. And intent is usually irrelevant and we get it wrong. I'm not going to contain. I'm going to humble. I'm going to extinguish. That is the fastest way, if there's hope, of relational wholeness. So let me ask you 2 questions. Is there a family member, a neighbor, a coworker, a friend who has been crushed by your words? And I know what you intended. I know what you explained. I know what you meant. But they were crushed by your words. And have you attempted to contain and explain a word fire that you actually have the power to extinguish? But it's raging because you've never humbled yourself and you've never moved in the direction to be sensitive. And if this is somebody close to you, as I said, this is gonna be hard. I mean, some of you want to do this, but now you're gonna feel like, well, if I do and we're here together, they're gonna be like, well, you're just doing that because you heard a message. Fine, that's the perfect time to do it. And it takes humility, but you should do it right away because you'll be glad you did. And that's great advice for everybody. If you implement that, because Jesus is smart, Paul's smart, James is smart, you should take their advice. You'll be glad you did. But if you're a follower of Jesus, this is at the essence of what it means to follow Jesus and to love other people. So let me just give you a couple things and I'll be done. Dads, your words weigh 5,000 pounds. And we all have regret. We've all said things. But as much as you can put that to the forefront of your mind, I've told the story 4 or 5 times, but I'll never forget the importance of this for me, where I would get in my daughter's bed at night and I would just speak, and I still do this often, just words over her. Not so much about what she did. I really try to lean on who she is. You are loved by God. God has an extraordinary plan for your life. I see unbelievable kindness in you. You're a bright light wherever you go. God has given you an amazing personality to have impact and influence. And I would just say all these words over, especially, and I remember when she's about 5 years old with her big 5-year-old eyes, when I got done one night in the bottom of her bunk bed, she just looked back up at me, and I'll never forget the moment, and she's like, Daddy, say it again. Daddy, say it again. Your words weigh 5,000 pounds. Kids, teenagers, whoever's gonna hear this, some of the weightiest words that your parents are ever going to hear are gonna come from their kids. There's no such thing as, well, she's just mom. Women, for whatever it's worth, you are not responsible for fragile ego of men sometimes, but it's just the reality of life. Steward your words well. And men, use your words to shape the kind of future you want for your daughter, or if you ever had a daughter. Honor women with your words when they're around. Honor women with your words when they're not around. Think about shaping a culture. This is how I would want culture to be facilitated for my daughter, or if I ever had a daughter. And do not normalize individuals who don't do this. Well, that's just how people are. That's just how guys talk. No. Jesus would say, that's not how followers of Jesus behave. Your words are powerful. Your words have the power of life and death. I want you to consider everything that you say, whether people hear it, whether people don't hear it, because it is creating a future for somebody. Use your words wisely. And listen, some of those important words you're ever going to speak are words over yourself. And for some of you, this is going to sound almost funny to do, but you need to break some multi-generational things around words that were said and unsaid by what you begin to tell you. You have a narrative about your life. This is what I always do, and I'm an idiot, and I can't believe it, and I'm never going to get it right, or I feel like a bad parent a lot. No. If you're a follower of Jesus, your identity precedes your behavior every single time. And when you begin to speak your identity, the scripture is really clear, is that your life and your behavior will follow it. So you have a divine destiny. You are loved. You are extraordinary. You have courage. You have boldness. You have everything you need to do what God's called you to do, even if you're not doing it in this moment, because you serve a resurrected Savior and you have the Spirit of God inside of you, and you unleash that identity by beginning to align with the fact that it's true and speak it over your life. And if you do long enough, your behaviors and decisions will follow it. Some of the most important words you're ever going to speak are over you every single day. Here's what the writer of Proverbs says. The tongue has the power of what? Of life and of what? And you already know that. And so as you leave today, we're going to give you this sticker just as a reminder, Proverbs 18:21, that just says, watch your mouth. Your words have the power of multi-generational life. They also have the opportunity of multi-generational destruction. And can you imagine if we just took this one thing seriously? Would you guys pray with me? Jesus, thank you so much for what you're doing in this moment. And I have a pretty good understanding of how this hits. And so I pray right now for unbelievable grace, where all of us have circumstances that rise to the surface where we've gotten this wrong. I pray for just your love to wash over us, where we're in this moment reminded of words that were said to us, about us, over us, that have shaped us in negative ways. And God, I pray that regardless of maybe even what regret that we have, that we would not give in to the lie that it's too late in any relationship, and that we would begin to move in the direction of controlling our words, extinguishing when we have been wrong and wounded, and begin to take you seriously as a follower of Jesus in this area. And so God, give us the wisdom to know what to do, give us the courage to do it, and we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.